Okay. Hello, everyone. So today we're fortunate to host Shin or Eric from UCSB, just up the coast. So Eric is an assistant professor at UCSB, where he directs the Center for Responsible ML. He's also head of research at Simular, which is an AI agent startup. And prior to his faculty position, he worked as an industry researcher at Meta, Google, and Microsoft, and has been a longtime contributor to the communities in the major NLP and ML conferences. He's won many research awards and grants, such as Best Paper at CVPR, and his current research is in multimodal and agentic AI, so cross-cutting NLP and computer vision. And today he's going to present on his recent research on AI agents. So join me in welcoming him today for his talk.
Thank you for the nice introduction. All right, so I'm going to talk about our recent work on building AI agents that reason, act, and evolve. So some of our works are from the research lab at the UCSB, and some are from our startup company Similar, right? So I'm wearing two hats here. All right, so in the last decade, we have witnessed remarkable AI breakthroughs, right? In the deep learning era, AlexNet marks the resurgence of neural networks. And then in 2016, AlphaGo is the #1 Go player, Li Shuzhou, which shows the strength of deep reinforcement learning. And of course, right, in around 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, ChatGPT demonstrates the power of scaling law in terms of both data and model size. And the key question is, what is next? So we can actually draw some inspirations from fiction movies such as Wall-E, Baymax, and Ready Player One, and turn them into reality. So I believe the next big step is to build AI agents that can see and understand the multimodal world we are surrounding, chat with humans in natural language, and more importantly, take actions to interact with the external environment. Right? AI agents is now a buzzword, and some people are saying that 2025 is the year of the AI agent, which is true. However, it's just the door of AI agents. So, and I imagine in the next few years, there would be more and more progress and breakthroughs in this domain. All right. So say we could build, a robot that can clean our house and cook us dinner as we command, and maybe a medical assistant for 24/7 patient care, or a smart drone that can fly and survey the field, as well as some digital agents that can automate all kinds of complex, tedious works on our computers and mobile devices, right? And all those kind of agents can help complete tons of real-world tasks in both our daily lives and critical industries. And today, I'm going to talk about 3 aspects of AI agents: reason, act, and evolve, like how they perceive and understand the world in their mind, how they actually interact with the environment by producing actions, and more importantly, how can they self-learn and improve themselves without human involvement? All right, I will start with the reasoning part. All right, I think everybody is aware of chain of thought reasoning, right? It is one of the most widely used reasoning paradigms nowadays for large language models. For example, the model can be given a task, such as use one sentence to highlight Santa Barbara, and then those reasonable model would first, think in their mind, producing some step-by-step inner monologue, which mimics how humans might talk through a decision, right? And after this thinking process, then the model would verbalize the final answers again by generating the word one by one. Yeah, however, humans don't really think in this way, right? At least not all the time. The chain of thoughts is essentially sequential and discrete, right? It even during the thinking process, it generates their own thoughts word by word. So each token builds upon the last one in a linear path. While for humans, we think fluently, right? So we reason with continuous abstract concept. We may hold multiple ideas in mind at once, and we may jump from concept to some concept, high level goals to high level goals. All right, so to address this problem, we introduce soft thinking, which is a training-free method that allows the reasoning model to think in the latent space, in continuous latent space. So here is how we do it, right? So we still take the input context as discrete tokens to the model. And while the model starts the thinking process, then we generate a soft concept token, which keeps the full probability distribution over the vocabulary. So the soft token serves as a superposition. It can preserve a superposition in the thought process, right? It may hold, it holds the meanings of multiple words. So potentially, including the possibility of parallel reasoning paths. And yeah, to do that, we basically create the soft token by a weighted mixture of all the token embeddings. So very simple process, right? Now, instead of feeding the hard token into the model during the thinking process, we create this soft token and feed it into the model, and so on and so forth until we generate the end of the thinking token. And after that, we will let the model to verbalize the final answer with the discrete tokens again. Here is a visualization of the soft thinking process. Okay, as you can see, in some key steps here, the models, those soft tokens can hold the meanings of multiple different words, which actually saves us some token usage. It can represent some nuanced in-between concepts that cannot be captured by any single word. So multiple reasoning trajectories are implicitly explored in parallel, making the model more robust and efficient. Here is an example to show the difference between the chain of thought thinking and soft thinking. So given a question like, what is the answer of 43 times 34? As you can see in the chain of thought thinking process, there are some unnecessary tokens generated in red. And in the soft thinking process, the reasoning model managed to bypass those unnecessary sub-steps.
Wait, you can ask a quick question.
Yeah.
So I thought your soft me thinking would not actually generate the tokens, right? So what is the token generated here? Is like you trying to reinterpret the sequence, or is like
Yeah. So each soft token is a mixture of embeddings, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
but we can still sort of visualize the thought by choosing the nearest neighbor, the nearest embedding.
Oh, I see. So this is, I see.
And when we do that, it is still interpretable. Yeah, this is just for the demonstration purpose, right? So
Okay.
we,
Yeah,
we,
and
we
I have
basically
another,
map.
I have another quick question. So, do you think that would there be a way that if we can add in some, maybe some loads for the chain of thought or some way to also ask it to compress its thinking process? Maybe,
Mhm.
yeah, maybe adding some loads like if if it is generate more brief chain of thought, then you got better reward, something like that.
Yeah. Are you saying that maybe we can add some reward in the thinking process to encourage the model to generate some more important tokens?
Yeah. Rather than
Yeah.
doing self thinking, yeah.
Yeah. So in this paper, right? So we just introduce a training free approach, and we only do soft thinking at the inference time. Uh, Partly because we are the soft token here are the mixture of embeddings. So uh they're still kept in the original embedding space. So no training is okay in this case. But if we would like to fully unlock the potential of latent space reasoning, then yes, I think we need to train the models to better incorporate those soft tokens, as they are still not or the word embeddings from the pre-training process.
Okay, I see. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And there are already some follow-up works doing that. So yeah, there are some follow works doing that, try to incorporate training to enable better soft thinking following our approach.
Yeah,
Or-
actually following on this topic, can I ask, maybe I'm not very familiar with this work, but how does this differentiate between, I think the previous work, Meta's Coconut, which also I think uses continuous reasoning
Yeah,
tokens?
so yeah, Coconut is a great paper, so which sort of inspire us to work on this. And for Coconut, okay, so instead of they basically use the last hidden state of the intermediate transformer representation as the latent space token. So, and because the models cannot really understand that during the pre-training process, so they have to train a new reading model from scratch. So, and then in that case, they can not leverage the most recent advances of the reasoning models anymore. So they can train a latent space reasoning model from scratch, let's say a 7B or 8B model, but they usually cannot outperform the other models. Right? And here, since our soft tokens can still be considered sort of within the original embedding space. So we can do it in a training-free manner. And second, even if we decide to train it to perform better, we can just fine-tune the original model to do that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
All right. Here are some quantitative results, right, on some popular coding and math benchmarks. It improved the accuracy by 2.5% and reduced the token usage generally by over 20%. And we tested across multiple base models, including DeepSeek R1, 32B, 72B, and QWQ32B, basically all the available open source reasoning models at the time.
Just a quick question here, Eric. So I think the question is just about the COT thinking baseline. The decoding used for that, is this like a greedy decoding, or is there any kind of other decoding which was used here?
A graded decoding.
Okay, well, sounds good. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so that's the sort of thinking paper. And yeah, so but as you can see, those thinking models, those reasoning models are still doing text-only reasoning. What if we extend, the reasoning paradigm in the multimodal domain? Then we observe a very interesting thing. So basically, when we train those models, those multimodals to do reasoning for vision and language tasks, we observe that, when the models think longer and longer, actually its visual hallucination also got amplified. So more thinking leads to more visual hallucinations. Here we show the comparison between the base models and those reasoning models. So Quinn 2.5, 3B and Quinn 2.5, 7B are the base models, and all the others like LMR1, Ocean R1, MMR1, those multimodal reasoning models are fine-tuned based on the Quinn models. And there are two dimensions. The x-axis is the reasoning accuracy, and the y-axis is the perception accuracy. And as you can see, although, after fine-tune the model, after using reinforcement learning to fine-tune the model for better reasoning, those reasoning models achieve better reasoning accuracy. However, their perception accuracy actually got dropped. So more thinking leads to more visual hallucination in this case. And here is an example, right? Given a very simple perceptual task, such as, is there a sports ball in the image? The base model answers, no, there is no visible sports ball in the image. The image shows a baseball game with a batter, catcher, and umpire, but the baseball itself is not visible. So which is correct? There is no baseball implicitly shown in this image, right? So the model is correct. However, if you look at the generation from a reasoning model, then it says, let me start by analyzing the image itself. Although no specific mention of a sports ball is made, the context strongly implies its presence, as baseball games inherently involves a ball. So yes, there is a sports ball in the image. So apparently you can see the reasoning model tends to overthink, right? So it tends to leverage some of the pre-trained knowledge to answer this question, which leads to the spurious correlation here. Right? There is a spurious correlation, and then there is a visual hallucination. The reasoning model actually hallucinates in this case. So text-only reasoning is not the right way for multimodal tasks, right? And in this particular paper, we analyzed this and introduced a new benchmark to evaluate, multimodal reasoning tasks and compare the trade-off between reasoning and the perception. And meanwhile, we also introduce a method that can ground the reading process back onto the visual image. Here, in addition to text-only reasoning, we also train the model to generate the coordinates, visual coordinates that correspond to some specific regions in the original image, right? So during the thinking process, it explicitly, reallocate some attention back to the original image. And these methods tend to be really sample efficient, right? We can just use 20 examples to reinforce the grounded reasoning capabilities by eliciting the model's native grounding abilities. So basically, those models, those multimodal LLMs can generate coordinates, right? They can locate things in the image given a text query. However, they just don't know how to do that during the thinking process. So all we need to do is to teach them to do that. So we can just use 20 examples to do that. In this example, as you can see, the task is to count the number of eggs in the nest. And with our method, the model managed to generate the exact coordinates for the 6 eggs in the nest for this counting problem, and finally crack the answer.
Just a quick clarification here, Eric. This visualization that you're showing, is this just for this example purpose, or is this something you also have in the thinking itself? Like, do you use kind of visualization tools, or is the LLM generating something as well, or is it just for the example purpose here?
It's just for visualization. So
Okay.
the models would generate the coordinates during the thinking process, but we do not use any tools, to crop the image and feed those images back to the model. So there is a thinking with the image feature from ChatGPT, right? Where they basically use some external tool, call some external tools to crop the image and zoom in the image and then feed the image back to the model. Here we take another approach. We just, elicit the model's native grounding capabilities. And as we believe by doing that, if we can scale this up, right? So then the models, even without interacting with the image anymore, the models should still able to relocate the attention to the original image for a better grounding and reasoning.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, Eric, because we are also look into this sort of grounded reasoning and all that. We actually haven't get much success. Do you say this is specifically helpful for some of this counting task, or it would be more general?
Yeah, so I would say this paper is more like a preliminary study. And so it shows some improvements over some general visual reasoning tasks, but in a few short learning settings, right? Next, we are going to introduce a more general approach, which shows consistent improvements over different kinds of vision and language tasks. So I think the idea of grounding the thinking process onto the original input is very promising, right? It should work in general. Yeah.
Right. I think I agree with the high level intuition, but I think in reality, something we tried and wasn't quite successful. So I was wondering whether it's particularly, or do you have more general success? Maybe you'll talk about it later for this, like a coordination. Do you think coordination, or for example, do you, in your experiments, is coordination the best representation that helped you? And also, what type of tasks?
Okay, so we have a better approach. Yeah, now we recently got a CVPR paper with a better approach than this one. So I'm gonna introduce that next.
Okay, that's great.
All right, so as you can imagine, right? So generating the coordinates may still not be the best way to do that, right? Even in our mind, we don't explicitly generate coordinates or identify some regions, right? So I guess we really don't know what's really happening in our mind. And so perhaps, while we forcing the models to ground back to the original input, then they can interleave, their seeing and thinking within their mind as well. So, and the next question we want to answer is, can models dynamically interleave seeing and thinking within their minds, or in the latent space? So to answer that, there are two sub-questions. First, whether those multimodals really require visual perception at every step of reasoning. Second, if not, right, then it means, those models need dynamically take the visual perception and ground back to the original input. And then can their internal representations indicate when visual perception and reasoning is required? So we did some analysis. So first, we introduced our visual dependence score. So I'm going to skip the detailed definition, but basically, so given a token or sequence of token, we define this visual dependence score to show, how much visual dependency is there for this token, right? By comparing, the output disparity between the original visual input and the perturbed visual input. And based on our observations here, we noticed that first, the visual reliance during the reasoning process is pretty sparse and highly uneven across tokens. So not all tokens have a very strong visual dependency, right? And the visual dependency is actually very sparse, and only at some key tokens, the models need to look back to the image. And second, in general, the reasoning chains with strong visual reliance consistently achieve higher accuracy. There is a very strong correlation between the task accuracy and visual reliance. So at the reasoning chain level or at the task level, right? So what does that tell us? First, basically, visual grounding is really important, right? There is a very strong positive correlation between visual reliance or visual grounding and the task performance. But this visual grounding is not necessarily at every step. And it's actually very sparse for the tokens within a reasoning chain. So the models really need to dynamically ground itself back to the visual input. Right? And it need to learn how to dynamically interleave between visual perception and reasoning. And to further address the second question, how we should do that, right? We examine the role of internal confidence in multimodal reasoning. We define the confidence gain. Basically, it is defined as the change in the model's probability of the correct answer after adding a reading step. It matters, how much each step really contributes to the final prediction. And we observe that, correct reasoning chains consistently maintain higher confidence than incorrect ones. And at the step level, those, faithful reasoning steps tend to show higher confidence, while hallucinated steps correspond to lower confidence. So yeah, higher confidence tends to indicate higher reasoning accuracy, and it also aligns very well with visual grounding. Then, we can leverage this confidence to determine whether we should, when and how we should do this interleaved reasoning and perception. Then we introduce a method called dynamic multimodal latent reasoning, DMLR. So it is a test time optimization method where we preserve some latent thinking tokens, and we will iteratively update those latent thinking tokens with the model's confidence as the reward, right? So note that this can just be done during the test time. It's a test time optimization approach. And in addition to all those text tokens, we also have a layer to project the visual embeddings as the visual tokens. And these visual tokens are dynamically selected and injected based on the current reasoning state. So condition on the current reasoning state, the model would dynamically determine whether those visual tokens should be injected. And those visual tokens will be only kept when they consistently improve the confidence. So by doing that, the DMLR approach tightly couples perception and reasoning, which allows the model to progressively correct itself while maintaining the efficient inference. So yeah, but you could think of the latent thinking tokens as the latent beliefs for the reasoning process, and it could also determine whether and when we should incorporate the visual tokens into the thinking process. And here are the results. So the DMR approach is quite promising, right? So we demonstrate its effectiveness across mathematical reasoning, visual reasoning, and multimodal composition benchmarks. And as you can see, compared to some other approaches such as multimodal chain of thoughts, CCOT, and in iterative chain of thoughts, those previous SOTA approaches for multimodal reasoning, DMR shows quite significant improvements across all those benchmarks. All right, so that's the reasoning part. Next, I'm going to use computer use as a case study to introduce our effort of building the AI agent that act like humans. And those works are done at similar. So, every year, people spend 1,500 hours just clicking around on your computer. And that's roughly 3 months of your life. And so we, as a human, we gradually become, operators of machines rather than creators and thinkers, right? But today's computers were designed long before AI was even a thing. So it's time for that to change. So at similar, we would like to build a general purpose agent that can use your computers like human, right? By clicking, typing, and automating anything from a single prompt, right? We typically call that computer use agent. And it can work across different industries, right? Including healthcare, real estate, insurance, recruiting, basically any jobs that you can do on your computers. Here, I would like to show you an example. Right, so the task is to use CRM to find email leads and grab contacts to draft some cold emails to them. right? So basically the agent receive the natural language query, interact with our computer via the most interactive way, mouse and keyboard control. So it clicks buttons, copy emails, move through pages, fill out the informations, and eventually send out the code emails on our behalf. So behind the scene is our open source method called AgenS. We have published a series of papers about AgenS. So the original AgenS paper received the Best Paper Award at uCLR 2025 Agentic AI for Science workshop. And then AgenS 2 paper was basically featured among the one of the most cited papers at the column last year. And AgenS 3 paper is demonstrates the first computer use agent that achieve human level computer performance, and everything is open sourced, and the repository has collected over 10,000 GitHub stars now. Well, there are some common challenges of building computer use agents. For example, those pre-trained models may lack of domain knowledge within individual apps, and so they really need to adapt to some new unseen interfaces. And the computer use tasks are typically long horizon, which may consist of hundreds of steps in noisy environments. And to address some of those key challenges, we first introduced the agent as paper 1.5 years ago. So where we have the experience augmented hierarchical planning approach. So it is for giving a task, then our agent would break the task into a sequence of subtasks, and then for each task at the full task level, it will retrieve some similar full task experience from its narrative memory, and at the subtask level, it retrieves some subtask step-by-step experience from the episodic memory. And in addition to retrieve all those experience from the memory, it can also search online for some expert experience. And then before executing each task, it will, fuse those knowledge together and augment them in the context to generate a new plan. So AgenS achieves doubles the performance than the previous SOTA, but there was still a very huge gap between AgenS and the human performance. Then to close the gap, we then address the grounding bottleneck. So although the agent can leverage its own experience to plan better, however, it still doesn't know where to click precisely, right? So to address the grounding bottleneck, then we introduce a mixture of grounding approach, which combines the different experts, including the visual grounding expert, which can output exact coordinates on the screen, given a natural language prompt. The textual grounding expert, which uses OCR approach to identify and select the spans of text, and the structural grounding expert, which grounds to and edits multiple cells in the tabular structures. So those grounding experts deal with precise grounding for different subtasks, which elevate the cognitive load on those generalist models. So those powerful reasoning models, large language models can work on high-level reasoning and then delegate those low-level grounding tasks to different experts. So AgenS2 doubled the performance again. However, as you can see, there was still a big gap. And then with the incorporation of the newest, reasoning models, then we managed to build a stronger baseline for computer use. And beyond that, we also try to scale the number of agents for computer use. As a human, we cannot clone ourselves, right, to solve a computer use task or solve any task. But as an agent, since they work in the digital world, they can easily clone themselves and have different agents to work on different things, or they could, have multiple rollouts to perform the same task and see which one works the best. To enable this parallel execution of the task, our newest paper, Agent S3, we address two key challenges. First, those long horizon trajectories are typically information dense, while most of which are irrelevant to task success. So the relevant information is actually pretty sparse. Most of those information in the trajectory are actually irrelevant. So if we feed all the trajectory information into the model, then it can easily exceed the context window of the model. So we need more precise and context trajectory representation in order to evaluate whether a trajectory is good or bad. Second, the evaluation itself is non-trivial, right? So current automatic evaluation metrics struggle to determine if a task is correct or not. So we need better and more reliable evaluation of multiple rollouts. And in AGS3, we introduced a behavior judge with comparative evaluation to address those two challenges. All right, so we don't have enough time for the details, so I'll skip the details and show you the final results. So now with Agent S3 to scale the agents for computer use, we achieve superhuman computer use on the OS World benchmark for the first time. I think that marks a milestone for computer use, although I think there is still a big gap to really achieve human level computer use from multiple aspects, including the accuracy, the reliability, the latency, and the adaptability. But at least we managed to, achieve a higher accuracy on commonly acknowledged benchmark. All right, so in the end, I would like to briefly mention our newest paper on learning AI agent that can improve themselves and evolve beyond human. So first, I would like to talk about the open-ended self-improvement of AI agent. If we think about the scientific progress in different domains, right? So they are typically open-ended, right? So which means, exploration never stops, right? So we need to explore all different possible solutions and hypotheses in order to find what really works. And those progress can be accumulated together. So, right? So the discovery should accumulate compound, which allows us to unlock some future advances. However, if you look at the existing AI systems today, right, they often use some fixed human-designed architectures. Even for our agents as framework, we still design the framework on our own. So it is still humanly designed, which may or may not be the optimal solution. And those AI systems can be improved, but typically through training and optimization, right? And human involvement, and they remain structurally constrained then. And this requires continuous human intervention to improve those agentic models or systems. And there are also some efforts on developing some self-evolving agent to improve themselves without any human involvement. And those methods are typically biological inspired and individual centric. So it still follows, the golden Darwin evolution principle, right? So, but as an AI agent in the digital world, they doesn't really need to follow this biological evolution principle, right? So if we follow this biological principle, we basically, to produce a new agent, we will use a parent agent to do that, right? And then the evolutionary process would look like a tree structure, right? So those individual branches will remain isolated. And also, although there are diversity introduced in this evolutionary process, those diversity remains short-lived, and they cannot accumulate together to contribute to the long-term progress. So why are we still forcing those AI agents to evolve like biological individuals then? The digital agents are not constrained by genetics, lineage, reproduction bottlenecks, right? So instead, they can directly share everything. They can share trajectories, tools created, the workflow created, and the artifacts they learn. So instead, we introduce a new paradigm called group evolving agents, where we treat a group of agents as the fundamental unit for evolution. So previously, the evolution is about to produce a new agent from one or two parent agents, right? And typically one parent agent. And here we treat a group of agents as the unit for evolution. So at each evolution step, we would like to select a group of agents from the pool based on a performance novelty algorithm. We measure, the performance of those agents and the novelty of those agents to encourage diversity. Then we select those agents, a group of agents, and then we allow those agents to share everything, right? So we combine the experience, tools, and artifacts of within the group of agents, and then generate another group of agents. And this explicitly experience share turns, exploratory diversity into cumulative progress. Now, instead of remaining isolated within individual branches, so everything in the pool can be accumulated together to produce the next group of offsprings, right? So then it also encourages the consolidation of complementary skills within the group, right? And which leads to open-ended self-improvement that truly compounds. All right, so we use coding benchmarks as a test bed for our group evolving agents, right? And we typically start from a very basic agentic framework for code generation, right? And then the group of evolving algorithm would allow the agent to improve itself by introducing, more context engineering, more tools to use, and more constraints and rules. So here are the results on SW bench verified and polyglot, two popular benchmarks for code generation. And the x-axis is the number of evolutional iterations. The y-axis is the success rate. And as we compare, our GA, group evolving agent approach, with the previous SOTA approach for open-ended evolvement, Darwin-Gordon machine DGM, and some open-sourced SOTA agentic frameworks that are designed by human scientists. Right, as you can see, right, the GEA approach demonstrates substantial performance improvement over those SOTA self-evolving methods, right? And surprisingly, right, so just by letting the agent to discover better agentic framework on its own, it managed to match the SOTA human-designed agents on SW bench verified and hugely outperforms those human-designed agentic framework on polyglot benchmark, right? And that's like multiple years of efforts of human scientists. If we do a further analysis of the evolutional process, so we can basically see that the explicit experience sharing enables systematic consolidation of useful innovations. So here, we visualize the evolutional process of incorporating 9 important tools from 2.1 to 2.9, right? So blue box means those tools appeared in the whole evolutional process, and red means those tools are actually integrated into the best performing agent. If you look at the DGM evolutional analysis here, right, those tools are discovered during the evolutional process. However, lots of tools remain isolated, right? Because lots of tools are discovered within the isolated branches. So they are not actually incorporated into the final agentic framework. However, if you look at our GA evolutional process, all the discovered tools can be incorporated into the final framework. So no discoveries remain isolated, right? And we also show the transferability and the robustness of our approach. So here, basically, we show that this evolutional algorithm can work pretty well across different base models. And even if we just use one model as the base model to evolve and develop a new agentic framework, we can directly apply that framework to some other models, and then it works really well. So GA discovers model agnostic agent level improvements that generalize across different foundation models. And we also show that the GA approach can actually fix the bugs in the agentic framework in a much more efficient way than the other baseline, the DGM baseline. So here we intentionally introduce some errors into the initial agentic framework, and the GA approach can, on average, take 1.4 steps to fix those bugs, while the DGM approach often take 5 steps to fix all those bugs. All right. So yeah, those are the most recent papers we published within a year. And here I would like to identify some future directions we are really excited about. and some broader interests within my group. So in the future, we want to further build more efficient and parallel multimodal reasoning with some hardware acceleration. So far we are still doing it on the algorithm level. However, we believe we need to do some software and hardware co-design in order to fully unlock the potentials of efficient multimodal reasoning. And so today I'm mostly talk about the works related to computer use and coding agents, which is in the digital domain. However, we are really excited about extending our work onto the physics real world, right? So then we would like to close the perceptron action loop for embodied agent and robotics. And we will also would like to extend the self-evolving agent ideas for scientific discoveries, in addition to coding, math, and so they can apply to general science domains like physics, quantum computing, and materials. Yeah, and human is while we developing better and better agents. So as a human, we need to evolve ourselves, to adapt ourselves to those more and more capable agents as well, right? So we need to discover and study the best way for human and agent to collaborate with each other and potentially co-evolve with each other. And I would like to acknowledge, all the students in my lab and some funding agencies that support our research. And here are the references for the work mentioned in this talk. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the great talk. We're a little bit over time, but if anybody has some questions, we can maybe discuss a few quick ones. There are notably some questions in the chat. No, it's more thanking you for the great talk.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and if you have longer questions that would take more time, you can also reach out. Sure. But yeah, let's give Eric another round of applause. Thank you for coming, and thank you for the talk.
All right, thanks.